You heard me, I'm pretty critical. But I love Israel with all my heart and soul. I mean, I call myself a progressive Zionist. And some of my Palestinian friends say, why do you say Zionist? It's so nationalistic. And I say, no, if you go to the basic of Zionism, it's not. The same reasons why I think there should be a Palestinian state is why I thought there should be a homeland for the Jewish people. And some of my liberal friends say, why progressive? It's so woke. But I actually believe that, Tikkun Olam is progressive.
I'm only smiling because I say the same thing to my congregation.
It's not enough to be a liberal. I'm a liberal, but liberal is about freedom. But what about justice? What about progress? So I think that if you love Israel, you cannot stay silent to what our government is doing. That's, for me, a manifestation of love. And when you don't criticize, I say you don't care enough, or you're just blind. So for me, there's nothing more important for Israel than to call it when it is wrong, or our government is wrong. And to make the distinction between the Netanyahu government and its policies and Israel. Remember that now, around 80% of Israelis think that the government is wrong in continuing the war. The government is wrong for not accepting a deal for the hostages, even if it means Hamas still gains some power. Majority of Israelis think that the government is to blame for October 7th. Majority of Israelis think that there should be an investigative committee. So just, it's so easy, just be where the Israelis are. And that's why I think criticism, and then people tell me, but when you criticize Israel, you're actually giving ammunition to the anti-Semites. I think it's completely wrong. There's nothing that is more helpful for Israel than people seeing that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu are not all Israel, that there are so many other Israelis or so many other Jews who would not accept what's going on. So I think it's the best, they call it asbara, I hate this word, but the best for the Israeli image is to show that we're not all supportive of those policies.
So let me invite folks who may have a question to make their way to the mic. Otherwise, it's going to be a very short evening, but there's some amazing cake. So let's continue here. I got it. It's a full service restaurant.
Thank you, Nadav, for a very inspiring talk.
So here you know who you are. Do you want to just say your name first?
I'm Lenore Martin.
Thank you.
And both our daughters were bat mitzvahed here. We've moved this community, but
welcome back.
Yeah, deep affection for that. So the question I'm going to ask is a little bit academic, but you referred yourself a number of times to a two-state solution, so that Palestinians would have a state, Israelis would have a state, and you also referred to the issues in the West Bank that are going on now. We all understand what's going on in Gaza and in the West Bank. So many of us, as we watch the settlements increase, the question is, how do we think about a two-state solution? Because it's going to have to be somewhat different than the way we would have thought about it, let's say 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. So it's a tough question, but we are going to have to approach it if we're going to be able to have that two-state solution.
Thank you, Lenore. By the way, Lenore is a big expert on the Middle East and specializing in Turkey, and we had a lot of interactions when I was Consul General, and I used to learn from her. So the question is very much, an important question that many people ask. And there are different answers. There are some people who believe that there will be a clear separation and that the settlements that cannot be compensated with land swaps will have to be evacuated, just like we did in Gaza or in the Sinai. And by the way, with land swaps of 4% of the land 80% of the settlers could stay in their homes because the biggest settlements are adjacent to the Green Line. And by the way, the biggest settlements today are two ultra-Orthodox cities that are not there for ideological reasons. But still, you remain with some very thorny settlements, including a city named Ariel, that there's no way to compensate with land swaps. But it is one of the ways. The other people say, let's have a confederation. You know, that there will be two entities, but you know, we don't have to move settlers, and also Palestinians who live in Israel per se, or refugees that will come, you know, we will, or people who talk about land for all, which means no movement of anyone. We could just live together, even though there are two entities. Of course, there are some people who talk about one state, but I don't say one state and a solution in the same sentence because it's a one-state catastrophe, not a solution. It's an ongoing bloodshed that if the bloodshed will end, it will be in an apartheid state, which is very much different than the Zionist vision. So I don't know what will be the final agreement, but I think it should start with a sovereign Palestinian entity. And that those decisions have to be agreed between two sovereign parties. And if the Palestinians will accept the fact that some of the settlers will stay and will either become Palestinian citizens or will vote in the Knesset, and that's fine. But I think that if we don't help the Palestinians create their own entity, and if we don't end the occupation, it's not just immoral, it's also the end of the Zionist vision. Because we already have more Palestinians than Jews between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, which means that either if we give up on democracy or we give up on the Zionist dream, in any event it's giving up on the Zionist dream. So it is not, I'm not trivializing, but I think any move, including forcefully evacuating settlers, is better than the alternative.
Baskin, Lexington, and the Nadav I belong to Temple Isaiah. Welcome. So this morning I read an article in The Guardian that discussed public comments from the Netanyahu government about annexing all or part of Gaza, including publicly accessible maps showing how Gaza would be developed. My question is, if that happens, will it be possible to undo the annexation after Netanyahu leaves office? Or will that be too late?
But first of all, I don't think it is possible. I think that even the IDF brass understand that it's impossible. And at some point, they will, you know, they will put the brakes. But, you know, I do believe that everything is reversible. You know, when I look at Europe, and I remember what happened there, and what were the relations between Germany and France, and now they're in a EU, no borders, so everything is reversible. I don't believe in fatalism. I believe that one of the reasons why I'm optimistic is not because I'm sure everything will be good. I just know that we cannot predict the future. But those who are optimistic will have the energy to influence the future. And I do believe that nothing is final. But I don't believe that it is possible. Even though Smotrich doesn't speak about from the river to the sea. He speaks about from two rivers, from the Euphrates to the Nile. But Smotrich represents less than 10% of the Israelis. And I do believe that there are enough sane people in Israel that will not let it happen.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a JHPU student from Tufts. My question is, what are your thoughts on the hope and, I think quite likely possibility that, the Netanyahu and his regime in the elections next year is thrown out, and there's, you know, some combination of like Lapid and Golan and Gantz, and you know what that would look like, both from, you know, how their policies would be, and, you know, what, you know, Hamas's reaction might be. Because one thing that's concerned me a bit, even though I am very hopeful about basically anyone other than Netanyahu, is I remember hearing from some Biden administration official that whenever there was publicly space between them and Netanyahu, Hamas hardened their position. You know, we know they play those kind of games. And so, you know, would they also do something like that if a new, more moderate, you know, Israeli government comes in, and then, you know, what would that government be able to do in response?
No, thank you for the question. And for those of you who don't know, J Street U is one of the most important things that J Street is doing, and we are representing now, I think, in 50 campuses, but we're hoping to get to 70 soon. And while many in the campuses are in this binary that you're either pro-Hamas or pro-Bibi, we provide a space for nuance, which students could still care about Israel and be very critical and care about Palestinians when they care about Israel, which is amazing. So I'm happy to see a representative. To your question, I do believe, and the polls are showing, that if we had elections tomorrow, this coalition will lose, and we will have some combination of the anti-Netanyahu camp, which is a big spectrum from Bennett, Lieberman to Golan and some of the Arab parties. And some people tell me, so why are you so optimistic? Even if we take Netanyahu out and his coalition of ultra-Orthodox and Messianic settlers and corrupt Likudniks, we will still remain with some very hawkish people. So it is true that Bennett and Lieberman are very far from where I am, but I do believe that unlike Netanyahu and his cult, Bennett and Lieberman will move if the international community will move. Because Bennett, as much as he's a right-winger, he understands that Israel has to be connected to the world. He's a startup guy, and he also understands that we cannot lose the Saudi opportunity for regional. So I think Bennett and Lieberman will be just like Rabin. Rabin was a hawk, was not a two-stater, but when he understood the reality, he moved and created Oslo. And Begin, who gave up Sinai and dismantled the settlements, was completely anti any compromise. But when the world moves, with a lot of American help, Kissinger removed Egypt from a Soviet orientation to an American one, and Carter helping Sadat do the move, eventually Begin moved. So I do believe that this is the kind of leadership that we will have, that will maybe not initiate an end of occupation, but will go there if the international world will go. And that is one of the reasons why I work in J Street. I believe in this theory of change to help Israelis accept the right decisions. I'm still optimistic on this thing that some of the Biden people used to say. I think that they used to say it to justify their mistakes by not putting the right pressure on Netanyahu. And their rationalization was that this helps Hamas. I think it's BS, excuse my French, and some of them are my best friends. But they should have been much more powerful on Netanyahu, and this was an excuse. And I'm the last person that will advocate for Hamas. But the reason why there was no deal, it was not because of Hamas. Hamas did not change their positions from the get-go. Stop the war in Gaza, get the IDF out, and Netanyahu is playing with the families of the hostages, is keeping the war because it serves his interests, and the Biden people should have called it out, and I'm very sorry that they did not do it. And recently we heard Jack Sullivan kind of saying, what they needed to do, but they didn't do it in time.
Shalom. We know each other. Shaul, I live in Newton, I'm Israeli. I want to ask you this. In the winter between 1960 and 1970, Russia disintegrated. In the summer of 1918, Germany disintegrated. is Israel's society strong enough to withstand the current situation, and for how long? Especially if next election will not go the way we hope it will go.
Well, there is a say that the rabbi probably could say better than me, who was giving the prophecy since the temple was, right? So I'm not going to be a prophet. I think it's up to us. Everything can happen. But if we will, and I think that this liberal awakening that we're witnessing in Israel, that people are in the streets for so long, I don't remember when I ever had a Shabbat without demonstrations, for years now. And this awakening gives me the hope that the liberal camp in Israel, and not all liberals are exactly my cup of tea of liberals. There are too many liberals who think that democracy is only for Jews. I agree. But still, when you see Tel Avivians as a code for liberals, who for years only cared about the exit of their startup and what's the best restaurant in Tel Aviv, and all of a sudden they can quote Montesquieu about the separation of power, you see that something has changed, that people are not willing to let the settlers and the ultra-Orthodox and the corrupt Likudniks to run the show anymore. And I think that if we will keep on with that spirit, and the spirit of all those people that were called anarchists when they were demonstrating in Kaplan, and they feel the vacuum that the government has left, I still believe that we have enough people in Israel to make sure that Israel will strive in the future. But in order for that to happen, we have to end the occupation, and we have to make sure that the Palestinian citizens of Israel are equal, and at some point we also have to have some separation between state and religion, which is good for religion and good for the state.
Turn the microphone towards you. Thank you.
My name is Louise Enoch. I'm a member of Dorsey Tzedek, Reconstructionist.
Glad to have you here.
I'm not sure how to ask the question, but if by some miracle everything was settled and there was an Israel that still had Palestinians living as citizens of Israel and yet still feeling they were not full citizens, how do we reconcile Zionism, which is a Jewish state, with having members of that state not equal citizens? Because I think there are many indications that they don't feel that they're equal or that there's justice for them. How do you think about that question? About what is Zionism?
Sure.
What does Zionism mean in 2025?
The way I understand Zionism is that the Palestinian citizens of Israel have to be equal. And if you read our Declaration of Independence, this is what it says. I don't actually like to call it a Jewish state. I like to call it the democratic homeland of the Jewish people, which is both a homeland for the Jewish people and it's a home of all its citizens, Jews or non-Jews. That's the way it should be. And we have to work hard. I mean, minorities have issues in every country, but especially in our case, because of what we've been through, we have to do better. And I have to say that American Jews understand better what it means to be a minority than Israeli Jews. Unfortunately, many of us forgot. So help us. This is one of the reasons why we need you, because you still remember what it means to be a minority. You understand what it means to be in a Christian majority state and still have all those things are not as clear to many Israeli Jews, and that's why we need your help.
Hi, my name is Robin. I'm affiliated with Fairly.
And you are also welcome.
Thank you. And thank you both for your remarks. And
Let's move towards the
I'll move towards it. So I assume that, at least from the questions, most of us agree with what we're hearing today. But the bulk of the American Jewish community is not where we are. And I mean, my view is that my sense is that the Biden administration, this administration, every administration preceding these, plays to the majority of the Jewish population, believing if they don't, they're not going to have those voters in support of the Jewish community, which is how do we move the Jewish community to where we are, the American Jewish community?
So I have to say, I beg to disagree about the numbers. Our research shows that most Jews are exactly where J Street is.
It's changed, I agree.
It is already there. The problem, the challenge is how to turn those numbers into political influence, because I agree with you that the Bidens of the world still think, like old school, that AIPAC actually represent the majority of Jews, but are not. They maybe represent the Orthodox community and many evangelical Christians, but not the majority of Jews. Majority of Jews, time and time again, vote for those values of Tikkun Olam and for all the things that. The challenge, and this is why J Street was created, and it's a huge challenge because it's against a huge mechanism of organizations and federations and money. But we are seeing the results. The fact that today 2/3 of the Democrats in the Senate are endorsed by J Street and more than half of the members of the House is a huge change from what it used to be. So I'm actually optimistic that more Jews are now, letting their members of Congress understand where they are and not just the right-wingers. But we still have a lot to do because even though, as I said, we're punching above our weight, but we need to gain some weight. And because our budget is less than 1/10 of what AIPAC's budget is. So even with all this influence, it's been done by by very small staff. Where is Madison? Okay, so we have Madison and Janet and 2 more people in New England? Yeah, I'm sure AIPAC has, and by the way, Eric Gisser was a good friend of mine when I was Consul General, it's not personal. And we don't have anyone sitting in Florida. New York is covering Florida, Washington is covering Texas. We need more, and we need more people in the campuses. So this is why I'm here. I'm asking you to help us get more.
Hi, I'm Gina Copeland-Newfield, I'm a member here. Thank you so much for your insights. While we're talking about the future of Israel and Gaza, we're also seeing a humanitarian crisis unfold on the ground in Gaza with famine and millions of people displaced. And I'm just curious about your thoughts about what are the best ways right now to address the humanitarian crisis on the ground in Gaza?
Well, I do believe that if we don't stop the war, all the other solutions will not really work. Because we need someone to govern Gaza. Our government intentionally doesn't want to help create any alternative, which means that who will deal with the looters, who will deal with the Hamas, who will get the food to the people that cannot get to those service centers. So the most important thing to do is to stop the war and then flood Gaza and have any UN or whatever NGO that can help to deal with the humanitarian problem. And by the way, it's not just the hunger and starvation. Many people are getting killed every day because of the way this kind of GHF is managed. I don't know how anyone thought that this could solve the problem. So whatever you as an Americans, and you have the biggest leverage to stop the war. If tomorrow Trump write a sentence on Truth Social, is that what he called? Yeah. It could stop the war. It's that easy. Because Netanyahu will not dare. But unfortunately, Trump still doesn't get it. I know most of the people here don't have the clear connection to Trump. But we have to do our utmost to speak out as Americans, as Israelis, or people of the world, to stop the war. And that is also the only way to get an alternative for Hamas. Hamas will always stay as the war stays. They already turned into a guerrilla rather than an army, but they will keep on killing. I was fighting in the first Lebanon war. I saw it firsthand. I mean, you have people here who probably were in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's no military way to defeat organizations like Hamas. You have to have diplomacy. And the only reason why this war is going on is that there is no diplomacy. And who could do this? America first. Sorry that I'm saying that.
I am Julia Black, I'm also a member of the temple. And you actually started to answer my question. But the question I had was, what if our current president lacks the interest or perhaps the diplomatic skills in playing a constructive role here? And perhaps do you see a way forward with leadership emerging from the rest of the international community, and where would that come from? And do you see, Europe working with Middle Eastern states? Is there a way that doesn't include Trump that we can get to a good solution here?
Yeah, I mean, you start saying it. I mean, this French-Saudi initiative, which is not just French and Saudi, so many countries are part of it, is a good start. But of course, it's not enough. And it's also needed internally in the US. And for example, there are many initiatives now in Congress, because Congress still have the power of the purse, which is a very important leverage. And by the way, the Republican Party is not as united on this as people think. There is a big split emerging now between the evangelical Christians and the neoconservative and the MAGA Republicans, that not because they care about Palestinians or Israelis, because they just don't want America to be involved in all this mishugas in the Middle East, are now starting to stand up to Trump. So we have to push in every direction we can, and I hopefully Trump at some point will understand that Netanyahu is standing on his way to glory and business. But if he doesn't, at least we have to create all those forces, the Europeans, the regional, and the American public to speak out as strong as possible. If I had the silver bullet, I would have used it. It's not that I have, but I believe in hard work, and I believe in mobilizing, and I believe in political action, and we have to do all those things.
I think we're going to make this the last question. No pressure, but I think we're going to make this one the last question.
I'm Gail Rosen from Gloucester. I've been wondering if there is any movement within the IDF for people not to serve, and what would that do if there was like an anti-war movement like we had here in the 60s and 70s? I don't hear anything.
Yeah, no, there is. There is. It is not strong enough yet, but there is. Some of it is people just refusing, some of it people find excuses not to come, and many units have real problems to get reservists. By the way, there is a huge phenomenon of post-traumatic disorder and suicides of soldiers, which is not reported as much. And also you hear the people from the IDF that are telling the politicians that their plan is just, doesn't work, it doesn't add up. It's not, because the military in Israel is different, it's the people's military. So for example, my son was in reserve for a long time, and at some point I told him, Ido, now the orders are just not legal, according to our law. But my friends are there, how can I not be there with my friends? It's not easy, it's not trivial, but I think it's growing, and I think that we're reaching that point that if we do get into Gaza City, which already started, you'll see more and more of this.
Is there repercussions in Israel for an individual who refuses to serve?
Yeah, people go to jail. By the way, there are ways not to serve without saying that you're refusing. You know, you have a headache, you have whatever. There are different ways, but some people want to refuse because they want to make the point. They want to go to prison because, you know, it's a, so there are different ways, but it's very felt in the military.
Will you join me first of all in thanking Nadav?